Greetings from Uganda. Julius Mashamerewa says, good morning, Sebo. Good morning to you too. And welcome. Kenya's biggest conversation gets into its second hour this morning. And we're having a conversation about access to justice for those who can't afford it and those who are on a lower socioeconomic scale. How are they actually getting this and what can actually be done? And it's a serious issue, apparently. Our guest for this hour already seated. Njoki-Maina Gitau is the lead stakeholder engagement at the Project Justice Initiative. Good morning to you, Njoki.
Hi.
How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Karibu sana.
Thank you.
Hosea Jabez, we had a minute going through your name and talking about, you're prophetic in nature. So, hey, let's see what that's all about today. You are the founder of the Project Justice Initiative, and it's happy to have you here this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Karibu sana. So, do we call you Hosea or Jabez? Which one now do we go with?
Jabez.
We like Jabez because the prayer of Jabez is also one that actually can be, applied in this situation that we talk about this morning, isn't it? Yes. But before I get philosophical, how about CT gives us and welcomes you today with today's proverb?
There is a country in East Africa that the two of you may have heard of. Our proverbs are taken from countries all over this continent. So this week we're in East Africa. Take a guess. Which country do you think the proverbs are from this week?
Kenya.
Oh. That's your guess? You?
I'd say Uganda.
Very good. Kenya's next to Uganda, but the proverbs are from Kenya. For our listeners who do not know where Kenya is, okay. It's on the east coast of Africa, former British colony. The capital is Nairobi. The financial capital is Nairobi. The administrative capital is Nairobi. Yes, that's Kenya for you. Yes. We have a presidential system. We have a president, a deputy president, and then we mixed up a little bit. We have a prime cabinet secretary. Don't find it in the constitution, but we have it. We understand that the constitution can be expanded from time to time to suit our purposes. That's Kenya for you. Okay? Now the proverb for the day. The water of the river flows on without waiting for a thirsty man. Okay, let me repeat it slowly.
Okay.
The water of the river flows on without waiting for a thirsty man.
Jabez.
Yes.
What do you think about that? What does that mean to you? What do you hear?
I think to me it means opportunities go and don't wait for anyone, despite the fact that you really need that opportunity.
What about you, Njoki?
I think, added on to what Jabez has said, you may be having a need because, like CT has mentioned, you may be thirsty. But if you don't have the necessary tools, then the opportunities will still pass you by.
Ndu is going to ask me to give you a score on a scale of 1 to 10.
Or a million,
Yes, but in this case, the two of you get 11.
Okay.
It's good, no? It's like, what is that? 101%? Okay. It's possible. All right. Looking at some of the possibilities this morning and, helping individuals of low socioeconomic status to achieve free and fair trials. So when we talk about help, that means that there's a problem, isn't it?
Yes.
So if we're looking at this broadly, before we start to get into the details, what's the landscape? Paint a picture of what we're looking at here. If we're saying that these folks need help, there's a large number of people. Is it a few cases that we see every now and then? Paint a picture for us, Jabez, of what exactly is the situation when it comes to people of low socioeconomic status accessing free and fair trials.
Okay. Thank you. Now, to the best of our knowledge, based on the cases we deal with on a daily basis, it's almost 80% of people who face criminal cases, who are poor, are unable to have effective representation.
Repeat that again, please.
About 80% of the people who face criminal charges in court are unable to get effective fair representation in that process.
That's in Kenya.
Yes. Okay. And especially when you're looking at it against the party they're litigating. Because when you talk about criminal offenses, you're litigating against the government. So the government is a buffalo. They're coming to you when they're charging you with something. They've done a lot. Before that prosecutor stands in front of you, there's an investigator behind him. There is a scientist behind him. There's a ballistic expert behind him. Now, when you're defending yourself, and especially if you don't have money, you have a lawyer working on pro bono. Yeah? He's probably unmotivated. He's probably unaware. Yeah? So even if he could be motivated, he does not have the resources to get proper investigators to counter what the accusations are. He does not have resources to engage forensic scientists. So that is what we do, and that's how we got into this.
Okay, so Njoki, what's free and fair? When you talk about a trial being free and fair, who deems it free and fair, and what are the characteristics of a free and fair trial?
It's interesting that in our country, the onus of proving how innocent or guilty you are rests heavily on the accused more than it does on the law enforcement. Ideally, the way Jabez has said, for instance, this is a criminal offense that we're talking about, yeah? They should be able to give all the evidence, adduce everything that pertains to the trial. So, but if I don't have the resources to also have my own investigation, right, counter to what they are doing, then the entire case rests on what they deliver. So therein lies the question, the way you've asked, who determines, right? And so if they have the resources, then they are the determinants.
It's like starting a game, and they say, okay, this is going to be a fair game, but this team starts with 2 goals.
Yes.
Yeah, so.
But it's fair.
But it's fair. But you start with 0. So they're ahead. Even as you start, they're already ahead of you.
So if we're coloring it within the lines of justice here, and because at the end of the day, it is a judge who will adjudicate, who will decide the case. Are we saying now that judges are deciding cases whereby they already see this disadvantage? They're fully aware of the disadvantage of these individuals to hire lawyer, forensic expert, etc., knowing full well that they did not even get up to the plate to bat. They were somewhere in the field. They're still judging on these matters, knowing this information. Is that what we're saying?
Yes, indeed.
That doesn't seem fair at all.
Yeah, although it is not the judge's responsibility to get into it because of how our legal system is constructed. These parties litigate in their own capacities. Just because you're disadvantaged, the advocates still need to remain as neutral and examine only the facts that you're able to bring in front of them. In fact, a judge should not be appearing to be assisting either party with their case. And therefore, it is important, or it becomes imperative, that when we're talking about effective, as per the Constitution, is it actually effective if I cannot afford it? Even if I could afford it, I do not have a reach to the expert. For example, how many forensic scientists are out here? Personally, I'm a forensic scientist. How many forensic scientists are out here trying to give their input into defense?
What you raise has many facets to it. It's a philosophical question. But then it's also extraterrestrial. I'm going to explain why I'm calling it extraterrestrial. Because it's like you have a situation that involves real people and real situations, and then the theater of the absurd comes in. And the decks are stacked against certain individuals, again, from the get-go. And yet, the understanding from our justice system is that because it has gone to court, then we call it fair.
Fair, yeah.
When everything leading up to the point where you have taken it to court is actually unfair. Now, even as we say that judges only deal with the information that is before them, okay, surely. Are you saying that judges are not able to question and ask? They do probe into the evidence that is given, but simply by observing and looking at how something has been presented. Let me give the explanation why I'm saying this. I am told that one is advised not to be their own advocate. And I'm told that even members of the bench will caution you and tell you that perhaps you should get legal advice. It is unwise. So now, if I were to take that particular case, that's them intervening because they understand that you are probably not adequately equipped to do that. So we remove that. And so you then say that if by virtue of someone having studied law and having been certified as a lawyer and they are presented to you and you know full well it's a pro bono case, the unfairness cannot be adduced or cannot be mentioned simply because, in all fairness, the judge simply has to deal with what is brought before him or her.
Yeah, to this extent, yes, that a judge cannot or should not be appearing to be pushing or aiding one party to the detriment of the other party, just because you are well prepared. For example, if it is for somebody who's affluent, yeah, they have the resources and they're litigating against the government, and the prosecutor is not capable, yeah, the investigation was not well done. The judge can also now, then we can argue and say, I think you're guilty. Based on the information I'm having, I think you're guilty then. Let me aid the government to go relook at this. Yeah? Or ask the government, you guys you forgot to call this witness, which will help pin this guy down. They will keep quiet, even if they know the prosecution has failed to produce this, which probably could be in their possession.
What they tend to do is throw out cases. Based on they throw out cases, they say this case.
No premise.
Yes, there's nothing we are adjudicating here.
Yes.
So go away. Maybe that's the best they can do. Look, I think I didn't explain my point well. You see, I have this thing at the back of my mind and it's bothering me. Let me tell you why it's bothering me. I'm thinking of, say, the remand prison. And I'm thinking of the very many petty offenders who are there. Now, the judges have the ability to actually look and realize this person doesn't have to go back to remand. Our judicial system allows them. There are ways in which you can actually make that person pay for the alleged crime or whatever it is. But instead, they are sent. There are people who have cases pending, but they are still in jail. Now, are these the sort of people that you're talking about?
The people who are still in jail.
You are in jail. You are supposed to, you're told, pay a fine or do the other, isn't it? You don't have the fine. Danny.
Okay. That's not exactly the people we are talking about.
Who are you talking about?
We are talking about people who have been charged for particular offenses, and they have a counter narrative of what happened. But they are not able to present those facts in court because of limited resources and limited access to specialized services that are required that the government has.
Okay, so what kind of, circumstance are we talking about here? Paint the picture for us. Somebody's accused of what? Theft.
Sorry, if I may, I think there is something I want to put back. The category that you're also highlighting could fall into who we look into, because you've been accused. You have a totally different narrative. What they have against you is circumstantial at best. So now you can't raise the bail, or you can't come up with the amount, right? So you're in remand. And yes, so to speak, those are people that we could also look into because they have a different story other than what is being given of them.
The worst part of this story is that some people are in remand and they're forgotten. It's actually forgotten that you're in there. Case in point, there are many times when people were arrested in the COVID era because you're found walking past curfew. You will be arrested, arraigned in court, in remand. now. Cases arise every day. Unless somebody bothers to look, you will
At
stay
your
there.
file, yes. Yeah.
So this is the question that we're asking here, because we started this off with where is the problem, and we say that quite a number of people who go through the annals of the system don't have the resources required to be able to prove their case. So we're not talking about paying bail here. We're not talking about, putting up a bond. We're not talking about paying a fine. We're talking about, so because it's a criminal case, we're talking about you don't have the resources, monetary or otherwise, to prove your case, whether you are innocent or not, or you want to prove that certain kind of evidence was available. So what kinds of things are we talking about here? If somebody's accusing you of what?
Rape, for example.
And they want to say that particular DNA was found on a victim's body, and then this can be attached to person X. Now, person X is arrested, all right? Person X is brought to court. Person X would like to prove that actually on that day, they were not there. And the prosecution is riding on witness statement that actually it was person X who raped me. Right?
Yes.
Person X says, actually, I was not there, and I can prove that because I was in a hotel and I happen to have brushed my teeth. But I cannot prove that because I don't have the resources. Is that the kind of thing that we're talking about here?
Yes.
So give us an example of how this would play out and what would happen in court, and what happens to this individual if they cannot plead their case.
Let me take that one.
Okay.
What would happen in, let's take the first case scenario, you do not have the means. So what you're going to say, I did not do it. I'd like you guys to believe me, I did not do it. For example, there's the lady who was being raped, and another witness who saw you go into the house, yeah? So that, of course, rape, you must not have a witness seeing you doing it, yeah? Now, there is that. Now, you cannot prove, okay, fine, probably you were there, but you did not do it. Now, how do you prove that beyond that? In your own words.
Beyond your words.
There's nothing. So that is the first aspect. But then the second aspect, DNA was done on the semen that was on the samples that were collected from there. How was it processed? How did the government experts sequence this? Yeah. There is a popular case that I know is that affected a politician some time back, where there was an allegation that they had a baby with somebody, but then there's also an allegation that his son also had an affair with the same woman that probably led into the problem. Now, for example, in such a case, the expert, how they do the DNA identification for that case, where brothers or a father and a son are being accused of paternity, it's different from if CT and myself are being accused to be fathers. They required isolation for analysis in cases where they are brothers, in cases where they are brothers, is different. So if you do not understand that, you will not defend yourself. But then to answer the question for your case would be, we've done a case where somebody was accused of defiling a young person.
A minor.
Yes. And the minor explained how it happened. Yeah. And the minor says, luckily
How
for
young was this minor? How old was this minor?
was about 14.
Okay.
And they said the person had sent them for cigarettes, and when they brought back the cigarettes, they defiled them using their hands. And they did it in the bedroom or something like that. They did it in the sitting room, yeah? In the course of our looking into that case, we realized this man had a wife who was sick, cannot walk, yeah? So she's in the house throughout. We also realized the house they live in is a one-roomed house. Now, what the prosecution did not know, they actually even didn't go to see the scene.
They did not go to the supposed scene of crime.
Yes. Now, when you look at the factors vis-a-vis the allegation that this was done in the sitting room and the wife was in the other room, when you visit that house,
It's one room.
it is one room, kitanda iko pale kando, kiti iko hapa. You see, and now, the reason now, again, if you look at what would motivate a 13-year-old to lie, yeah, you come to realize it is a teacher who raised this issue with the child because the child was not doing very well. This child was late to school. So when they were narrowed down and asked, there must be something wrong. Yeah, the child just came up with
narrative.
Yes, that this has happened to me, and is why. And then the teacher also took it very quickly, took it to the police station. They did that. The other problem is, for example, medical examination.
Just let me pause for a second. Was this child known to the accused?
Yes.
They were neighbors?
Yes. Even the granddaughter of that person and this child play together.
Okay. Go on.
Yes. Yeah. So when this child was questioned at school why there's this sudden change of behavior, and then because also there are kind of awareness that children are brought into, like if somebody did this to you, kindly don't fear, just bring it up. Sometimes there's that possibility that somebody thinks that is what you want to hear. Why are you not performing well? Why are you struggling? Is somebody doing anything to you? But because probably you are late for your own reason, or this, you just see something. Now let me talk about, for example, medical examination. Post-rape examination requires that the victim, the nature of injuries are examined. Our Kenyan doctors fail to do an examination that is consistent with the international best practice for post-assault examination.
How is that?
Now, if you are to collect today a PM form, a P3 and a post-rape examination form, you'll realize how they describe a wound, when there's penetration, they do not age it, so that, for example, to say this is a 3 days old wound, that is something that they should be capable of telling you. So that they tell you this is a 1 week old injury, this injury is consistent with penile penetration. This is consistent with the other form of nini. Now, and this also affects some police stations or police officers. They quickly forget the clothing. And you see all of these things together. Actually, as we think,
clothing that the
victim was
the alleged victim was wearing.
Yes. Even if by the time it's coming to you, they had removed it, it is still good to collect it because it could still be having a lot of informational value to a case. And we think as an initiative that even by us trying to criticize or critique the processes that go into these litigation processes, it helps improve their practice. Because if you're examining me if I'm a victim, and then you fail to do all of these processes, all of these procedures, then you're doing injustice to me by making it impossible for me to prove my case.
So folks who don't have access to these resources, what happens to them?
So, CJ gave a very good example. Typically, and I say this often, cases brought in court are put in a file. And so if you don't have the resources, yours is considered a file to be looked into for whichever day, So they don't really realize that those files represent people. And if your affluence can't get you heard, then perhaps, and I don't mean to accuse anyone here, I'm just saying, then perhaps your file will take a little longer before it is looked into, before it is even considered.
If you don't have the money, essentially, for the resources for your case to be heard before a competent court, essentially your file will be put aside until when?
No, I think the best way to put it is your case will not get the proper kind of examination that it requires.
Yes.
And probably you'll go to jail for wrongs you never did. Let me give you an example. Before I worked in government, as an investigator, and there's one time I was an American visited Kenya. We came to Kenya via Rwanda, so he did not go to the embassy or anything. Now, when they were in Nairobi, they went to take pictures of Uhuru Park, and they were crossing next to Parliament. And they didn't know that was Parliament. And they started taking pictures of Parliament.
Okay.
And they were arrested. Now, it so happened that, I think some of these Westerners, when they come to Africa, they're told theft and things like that. So he was on high alert. And he was also an ex-Marine officer. Now, when a police officer approached him, he was with his camera. And in Kenya, police officers do not tell you, I'm a police officer. Then, they first grab you and then you're a So this was very strange to this person. Being an ex-Marine, he fought Alishika Jama and put him down. It so happened that this officer had his side down. Hapo. And this is happening just next to Parliament.
Right.
Now, this guy gets himself into a lot of problems. One is black American. So they do not know if he's a terrorist. Okay, they know he's not a Kenyan. So it gets him. So it lands on my desk, and I was looking at this case. Now, the police are trying to charge him with all this nature of offenses. They've called their embassy. They have sent officers, but because this person did not register when he was coming, and he has also broken the law of the land because he has assaulted an officer under these circumstances, then they cannot appear to be intervening. Now, what happens? This guy actually came to Kenya because he was taking somebody to UHMC for treatment. And he was supposed to be here for like 3-4 days, and then they fly out. His flight, ikapita, and it was non-refundable. Now, to cut the whole story short, is this person was to actually go to jail for allegedly assaulting an officer of the law in Kenya, knowingly. Now, what assisted this person is the person was very honest when I talked to him. And when I was talking to the officer, I realized this person was lying. Now,
okay, wait, hold on. This person and this person. Who was the honest one and who was the one
Person
who was
number
lying?
one.
Person number one being whom?
The photographer.
The American photographer was extremely honest.
Okay.
To a point where he was telling me, they have told me to give them 3,000 shillings. They will drop my case and I will go home.
Okay.
Yeah. But being a Marine, yeah, I would not.
My honor.
I would not give. So he lost air ticket worth 200,000 going back to the US, but not pay 3,000 shillings. So you see by Parliament there's the Parliamentary Commission. This aside, there's a CCTVs. So we went to get the footage of what happened. We realized the systems were not working.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Unfortunately, or fortunately for us, the officer didn't know. So when we called the officer to talk to the officer, we recreated that story in accordance with this Americans version. Yes. So we told him we've had an opportunity to look at this, and this is what happened. When we laid out what happened to him, 100%, he knew he was now in problem.
Cornered.
I'm willing now to drop these charges. The case was on the media a lot. An American has been arrested, and he was claiming that he was beaten by police and all that. Now, that is just one example of a case where somebody gets arrested on the wrong side. You do not have the capacity or ability to access that kind of service. Now, this guy the officer went to court and said, I'm now not willing to. Yes. And this American was given his passport and allowed to go back to his country. Now, that is one case. How many cases do we have where unasikia mtu anakuambia niliambiwa nitaekewa bangi? Na anaekewa. And then because, if today we put bangi on you and we produce it in court,
what recourse do you have and this is the question, to state otherwise? What are you going to use to say, actually, it is not mine? How do you do that? So now, if folks are being helped, and I think this is a question, if folks are being helped, how are they being helped? Because what are you going to do? If you don't have the resources, you don't have the resources. So how are you then going to prove otherwise what a state officer is claiming? Because like we said, in criminal cases, it is the state who is against you,
Against
the
an
individual.
Yeah.
So how do you work out your case?
I think what you're asking is how exactly do we intervene? And TPJI basically collates experts. For instance, forensic scientists, lawyers. So for example, if you don't have the resources, you're from a low socioeconomic status, probably, or maybe your lawyer is pro bono and motivated or doesn't know. Maybe he's interacting with your file on that day. So we collate a team of experts, forensic scientists, who then reopen. They say, okay, CJ had maybe CT. They say he had a firearm. Where do we start from there? Were there any fingerprints taken? If he was said to be in a particular place at a particular time, maybe he was next to a tower. Is his cell phone pinging at the same place? Can we geolocate him? And all of that. Resources that would be otherwise unavailable to someone who is from the lower cadre of the society.
And so with this assistance then, because we look at things like technicality when it comes to the law, and that there's certain things that are required if it's coming from, a case is being proven, especially when it has some kind of criminal culpability, that if it's something like rape, murder, things like that, that forensic investigations then would be required to be done. And we're saying that certain processes have to be carried out in order for those investigations to happen. So if you don't have the resources to bring this in, the likelihood of you proving your case is difficult. But are we also saying that it is also possible to employ those resources to disprove what these individuals are saying, to get you off on a technicality that perhaps a certain process was not followed? And in order to prove that, again, you would need these resources. Is that also a scenario that we would be looking at?
Yes. Yes, that is the unfortunate and unintended consequence of what we do. That in the event you are actually truly looking into a case of somebody who actually did rape somebody, and then you'd assist them get away with an offense that they shouldn't have gotten away with. That is the unintended consequence of what we do. Now, and the Project Justice Initiative was created by Somo Group. We are investigators, we are forensic scientists who do this for pay. But we are seeing the people that are able to afford what we do are from a certain
top
quarter. But then there's all of these other people down here. And in fact, what we did now, we said, look, this is not even going to be an in-house thing. We are calling on other experts. You come, let's work on this together. You're a criminologist, you're a lawyer. We take those cases. So this case has come on pro bono. You look at it. What do you think as a ballistic experts? Given this evidence, what can you do with it? Now, should the answers we get not be useful to you in the sense that they incriminate you more? Your lawyer retains the ability to discharge us. You see, and that is why also what we do is that you do not come to us as an individual. It's your lawyer who is dealing with your case pro bono reaches out to us because.
But does not then limit the opportunities. What about somebody who can't even forget even having a pro bono lawyer, doesn't know that you can get a pro bono lawyer? Or are we saying that we have a system where if someone sees like he has no representation, that there is a system, there is a mechanism by which they can be afforded one? We don't have an institution, we don't have an office of the public defender in this country. Or do we?
No, there isn't.
Yes, precisely. It was something that has been discussed, but it doesn't exist. Yes. So, how does somebody who has already been arrested, doesn't have the means, even if he were asked or she were asked to pay 200 shillings, they would not have the 200 shillings. How do they get to you? Because in my understanding, that's the person who needs your help the most.
And are we saying that if they can't get to a group who is helping, essentially, your goose is cooked? You will be convicted. You will go to jail and pay the consequences for something that maybe you did not do. Is that what we're saying here essentially? That if you don't have the resource, you're done?
Yeah, most of the time. There was that case from Committee, a man who had been released from prison after 10 years, serving time of allegedly having defiled his daughter, only for the daughter to come back later and say, look, I was told to say these things.
By my mother.
Yes. Now, that is somebody who would have benefited from an initiative like this one. Having forensic scientists, having lawyers, having doctors looking at this, say, look, there is something wrong with this evidence that prosecution is presenting. It does not meet X, Y, Z. And then there's also this notion that because somebody is an expert witness, then they are right. Yeah, even evidence has levels of probability. And just because an expert has come to the probable inclination that you and this sample are related, does not necessarily mean it's 100%.
Something I want to understand. You say you're an investigator.
Yes.
I'll want you to explain what that means. And you are
I am a community psychologist.
Good. Let's start with you. What is a community psychologist?
So, ideally, I look at problems within the community, right from the basic unit, which is the individual, right to small groups, the family, then to slightly larger groups, and then the entire society. So how I come into play here is because eventually my role is not only engaging stakeholders, but looking at this in reference now to policy and how it affects certain groups. In this case now, we've already identified the group as the people who cannot afford all of this, what we were talking about before. And so my role would be probably at the tail end, where after every other person has done this, now we're looking at the implications in reference to policy. And I'm doing the research, coming up with it, and I'm saying this is what, or these are the gaps, and this is how the government or other institutions can then rally around this and change it.
How do you get communities to actually, this word empowerment, which is used all the time to the point where it's actually lost meaning, but let's use it for purpose of our discussion here. How do you empower groups so that in matters where they feel there's an injustice, they can get together? Because when there are many of you, that voice is heard a lot better than if it's just one person. So that they have within themselves a sort of structure that can utilize. Because if, say, I'm arrested and I'm part of that group, people will know I'm not there, but they want to know where I am. But if they're organized, then it is easier for them to get the sort of help that you are offering now. You are the investigator. What does an investigator do?
Generically, an investigator does investigations, yeah. But
do you have to work for the police to be an investigator?
No, you don't have to. I've been a government investigator, but I was never a police officer. Right now, I work as a spy, but I do not have to actually be a police officer to do it. Yes. So what we...
CT, when he said spy, your demeanor changed, but okay. Please carry on.
Not like a government spy.
No, it's all right. It's all right. If you work for NIS, it's okay. We understand. In fact, it's good. Now I know somebody who works in NIS.
Oh, wow. How about you take that to its end? All right.
It's very, very positive.
Okay.
I cannot threaten people. You know, I know people who work in NIS.
No.
Anyway, please. Yes. No, I'm pulling your leg.
Okay.
So what do you do?
So, as a company, we do corporate investigations. We do litigation support services. Yeah, that is as a company with the organization that we work for called Somo Group Intelligence. However, from what we do as a company, it has given birth to this thing that we're saying now, fine. There's all these people here that are not getting what they need. Yeah, they are not able to afford what we are charging. Because when you ask rightfully that, yes, somebody can be in this situation and they can pay for it. Fine, we'll work for you.
And charge you. Yes.
But when you can't afford it, and it's the majority of people, yeah? And what then do you do? then that's where we come in and we try to assist people. They deal with some of these things. We work with the community defenders. We are integrating people from different organizations to see how best they can easily just, help somebody answer a question, an evidence question. Properly, yes.
Njoki, as you look at things today, I mean, yes, the case for having a public defender has been made in Kenya, several times. Yeah. There have been discussions around it. But this is essentially what we're looking at today. That because quite a number, if we look at societies where the public defender position exists, it is for this very thing that we are talking about. Individuals who do not have the resource, individuals who do not have the connect, as we would say, to be able to defend them, whether they are guilty or not. Because, look, the law prefaces that, you are innocent until proven guilty. And that exists here as well. So are we looking at a situation where by and by, the conversation to have an office of a public defender then becomes necessary? Because it doesn't matter where you look. Look at all your institutions of incarceration today. That there are individuals who are incarcerated because they cannot afford a fine, they cannot afford resources, they cannot afford representation. So, is it time to have that conversation again?
Yes, thank you so much, because I always say this, change is very gradual, but we get there eventually, yeah? And such initiatives bring such conversations from the footnote to the main text. And so we're saying that eventually, because we're talking about informing policy later through evidence-based, like when we deal with a case and we research on it and we go into the communities and we find that this is a persistent problem, yeah? And so we're informing policy, and some of the recommendations that we're making are, let's do this, let's look into this. Let's say that there are people who cannot afford. And like he asked rightfully, how do I even get a lawyer in the first place, right? So that I can even get to TPJI. So if there exists such an office, then hopefully our work will be halfway done.
And the assumption is that because it is a state office, that it would be then properly resourced and equipped for these other things that our state prosecutor, for example, would have. So a state defender, a public defender rather, would have the resources, would have your investigators, would have your forensics team and all of that to counter what would be brought on by the state. That's the assumption. Is that the case?
Yeah. And I always look at this because government is pretty much intertwined, right? So for where you fund one institution, for instance, let's talk about having a public defender office, yeah? So if you do that, then that means the files that had been archived will be looked into, for instance, or there will not be as many files to be archived. And therefore, the money that goes into correction or probation or into prisons and what have you significantly decreases. So you see, funding one, well, to begin with, that there would be need to perhaps look into funding it. But in the long run, the effect will have it'll be a ripple effect on all the justice institutions that we have in the country.
Jabez, as we get towards wrap, what needs to happen? Because obviously it's huge here, especially when we look at the numbers of folks who are, number one, who are languishing, who get into a situation, again, guilty or not, still need that help and that representation. We're starting to scratch the surface barely, but what needs to be done?
With my just shallow thinking, the best I would say, if anybody in a position would take into consideration, is separate scientific services from mainstream prosecution services. That would be a big step in liberating the usage. For example, if forensic experts from DCI are coming to court, we know they're working for the prosecution. And that necessitates now what we are trying to do. We shouldn't actually have to do it, because then if there is a separate office of forensics or the National Laboratory of X, that means then there's no point of having this, because it means you as an advocate can just run to them, hey, test for me this. examine for me this evidence, do this for me, and then the same report you have, I can call you to go to court and testify on my behalf, so that it's an independent laboratory, as opposed to if it's with the DCI. If they find the evidence does not suit them, they will not call that expert. You see, but when it suits them, they call him. So you're screwed either way. If the evidence exonerates you, there is no investigator will include evidence that is injurious to his case.
Right.
You see?
Yeah.
Yes.
And if you don't have the resources, neither are you involving the two. Well, like I said, we're just starting to scratch the surface of this conversation, necessary to have it because, again, we're looking at people who need help to prove or disprove certain things. And unfortunately, incarcerated today, going through court cases today where they just don't have that kind of support. So thank you for being here this morning. Njoki-Maina Gitau is the lead stakeholder engagement at the Project Justice Initiative, and Hosea Jabez is the founder of the Project Justice Initiative. We've been having that conversation this morning. Thank you very much. Looking forward to chat with you again in the near future.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.